the tone, please state your name followed by the pound sign.
Look at the version. So it's not the latest one, but it has pretty much all the documents out there. I think Dolphin will be up to later today. So, so we're still working on improve the layout of the Dolphin, but starting from last time, when you're getting started with Symphony, always first download Symphony zip, and then unzip it, copy all the Symphony resource to your local folder, and then you can start setting up your index.html. So just quickly go over, this is a Symphony 3 branch. So we have all the resource here, and we have a folder called Showcase. So here is where we have the sample Sonata app, and also Symphony N is just our Dolphin app. So all these apps are based on Symphony Next. For this demo, I create a new folder called Demo. And instead of this demo, I have two subfolders. One is called Symphony, another is App. For Symphony, I just unzip all the Symphony zip and copy everything instead of this folder, just to keep everything clean. And in App folder, I have all my app-related resource. In reality, you should probably organize your app-related resource, including JavaScript, CSS, and so on in your subfolder, just like Symphony does. But for this demo, because I don't have a lot of stuff, so I just put them in my app folder. So I'm going to take a look at it later. So Symphony packaged with many components. So as a minimum, to use the Symphony shell, you need to have Symphony core, widget, web shell, and Symphony API. But they also have other components, for example, the Symphony library. So we package a library workspace out of box. If you need to use it, you can include it in your index.html. And there are other things that, like inbox. This may rely on the OSJ, the old OSJ framework. So if you need to use it, you can include it. But for the demo for this demo, I will just need the minimal Symphony resource, all the JS file, and all the CSS files. Remember that Symphony also packaged Symphony Bootstrap. It's a customer-built Bootstrap that Symphony uses. If you forgot to include this in your index.html, your layout may mess up. So it says that, of course, you need to including jQuery, which is a pre-required by Symphony. It's now packaged with Symphony zip. You can download from the net the version you want. And of course, in your index.html, you can include your own resource. So I'm going to talk about this later. I think we just improved the Symphony a little bit recently. So you can actually put all the Symphony resource in the subfolder. So I put them in Symphony folder. But for this to work, I just need to, it's also on the documentation that you need to add this line in index.html to tell Symphony that all the Symphony resource is in the subfolder called Symphony. So this is for Symphony to figure out where to find the location of its image and the template. I think, Connie, I already covered this part, so I'm not going to talk too much. This is just your index.html, including all the necessary Symphony resources. So this is the second part of this documentation. Next, we're going to look at the app.js, where you can start writing your own code. What it does is to initialize Symphony and add your own workspace and configure header. So it's in this part of the documentation. Go back to my workspace. There is app.js. So this is where I initialize all the Symphony header and workspace. To start, you need to call Symphony ready. And what it does internally is to initialize the Symphony environment, including such as ITN or the literals, and also it will get the DOM ready for you to add the header and the workspace. And it will initialize a logger for Symphony that can log all the errors or information. But it's completely transparent to you. We may add some other things in the ready function. But all you need to do is code the ready to make sure that Symphony get ready for you to add workspace and header. So after that, code the Symphony core config header. There are many different configurations. It's based on the archipelago UX design. If you go to the Dolphin, there are different things you can config for the header. So for this particular demo, I think I'm going to show you how to do the search. So add a search and add a setting just to add a button in the setting so we can invoke some of the workspaces that we want to open. And so this is a header. So for each header dropdown or function like search, setting is a dropdown. You need to provide, the consumer needs to provide a JavaScript class that implements, pretty much populates the dropdown or implements the function, so how you can do the search. So it's implementing this JS class. So I put all my provider in a different file called the demo provider. We can look at it later. For now, just let's have a higher level look at how we also configure the workspace. Last time we briefly talked about there are 3 different types of workspace. Fixed workspace, which is always there, and you can now close it, and it will show in the navigation bar. If you look at the Dolphins, these are all fixed workspace. And then we also have float workspace. The float workspace will not show in the navigation bar. So you can only open it through some action. If you click on a button or a manual item, we can open it. So I'm going to show some example how actually we can open it and show it in the workspace. The third type is called asset workspace. So it holds all your assets. It supports one or multiple types of objects. So there is a setting for that. It's called supported objects. So here I said this asset workspace were three types of objects. So we can take a look on details how this supported object is used later on. So for each workspace configuration, you need to provide a content provider JS class. So this is also a JS class. It's similar like the JS class here that were used to, you can implement and provide a function to populate your workspace, and also other customization, for example, how to customize your workspace header, how to add item to the toolbar in the header, and so on. So, so look at this. So this is enough to configure a header and a workspace. All we need to do is to implement these 5 JS class. So these are all providers for the function or the workspace. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 providers, and I put them. Ideally, you need to put them in one separate file for each of them. But for this demo, because that's pretty short, I just put them in one file and call them demo provider. And of course, you need to including all this in your index.html. So in my demo provider, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 of this is for the 3 workspace, and most of them are empty. I didn't do anything yet. Just for the home workspace, which is the fixed workspace, I implement this function called init content. It's basically just to populate the workspace with something. And it passes you, the Symphony framework will generate the DOM for your workspace and pass it back to this function. And get hold of this container div, you can populate whatever you want in the workspace. So here I just print some a text message. But the other 2, I just leave them for now. And so this for the search, I haven't done anything for the search yet. We can look at the detail later. This is the setting. I just want to add some atom in the setting dropdown in the header. So I have 2 Atom, manage code setting, and another for the customer. I'm going to use it to open my workspace later. So before we dig into more detail for the code, let's just look at our browser, what we can see for now after we configure the header and the workspace and have these providers. The reason I need to put all the providers container here, even though they don't have any code, is otherwise the JS will through some errors. So now with just this two file, the app.js and demo provider.js, let's look at the browser. So last time I think Connie used to generate the Word file and drop it to Tomcat to start the web app. For me, I'm just kind of lazy. I use Gulp browser sync, so it's a Node plugin that it will start my web server and server static resource. So I don't need to package it into my Word file and drop it to Tomcat and restart it every time I make any change. So you don't have to use Gulp. It's definitely not necessary to use Symphony. But if you're interested in it or you don't know how to use it, there is actually a section in our Dolphin to give you some instruction on how to use Gulp, and it's pretty popular for front-end development. So, in my console, I'm in my showcase demo folder. All I need to do is to Gulp here. So this will start my Gulp server to serve my web app. So this is what you will see after we did the previous configuration. You see that we have a header with the title, so I can pick a search box and setting dropdown. So just setting dropdown, we have two atoms that we add in the provider. And remember also add 3 workspaces. But here we only see one. It's called home workspace. It's a fixed workspace because it's the only one we're showing in the navigation bar all the time. For the second workspace, we configure it's a float workspace. It will only show when you trigger it. So and also asset workspace, it will not show unless you open some assets. So now let's go to the demo provider. See, I have 2 atoms in my setting dropdown in the header. One atom is called setting, and what I want to do is when you click on this atom, I want to call the Symphony Core API to open the workspace, setting workspace. So this is the workspace we set here. By the way, each workspace has a unique workspace ID. That's how we identify it and open it using the Symphony Core API to open. So what we'll do is when you click on this drop-down, setting drop-down, the first atom for setting, we want to open the setting workspace. That's the API you can use. And for the second one, let me just call it customer. And what I'll do is actually open the data set workspace that we configured, which is this asset workspace. Its name is called data set. So, so for data set workspace, because it holds many different objects, you need to pass what object you want to open. So here I say I want to open the object whose ID is 1. So this is the contract we have for this API that you pass the object ID. Now go back to this in the browser. So we have the 2 drop-down. The first setting, remember, is we're going to open the setting workspace, which is the floating workspace. And when I click it, it will open something. So this is just an empty workspace because if you remember that my setting workspace is a content provider. It's called setting content provider And here, the setting content provider is there, but it's empty. So I didn't render anything inside. It's just an empty div. So it is open. So if I go to another workspace, like home workspace, and then you cannot really go back to setting workspace because it's not in the navigation bar. But if you click on setting again, it will be brought again. So this usually used to hold some user configuration, user setting, those kind of information in the floating workspace. The second one, remember, it's going to open the asset workspace. So if I click on it, you will see that the asset workspace is open. It shows that there's one asset, but it doesn't have any information yet. Because, again, we do not implement the dataset content provider yet. This is the workspace, the asset workspace. And we just say the object ID is 1, but we don't know the name of the object. So it doesn't know what to show in this part. So this part should show the name of the asset. And also, potentially, if you have icon, it will show the icon. And of course, you need to populate the workspace in this empty area to show the content of the asset workspace. So to make it, our demo application more interesting, let's actually open a real object. And to do that, I included in my index.html, you'll see that except the app.js and demo provider, I have a data.js. The data.js is just some demo data that I got from somewhere. We use it for Sonata app. It has a lot of information, but for this demo, all I need is an object ID, object name, and object type. We use the ID and the name to open the object and show it in the navigation bar. And we use object type to find the right workspace to open it. So before, I think I mentioned that we define asset workspace, there's quoted object. So when we we can actually call the Symphony API to open the object, and we're trying to match the object type with the supported object of the asset workspace. So you can configure multiple asset workspace, and it's different, and each of them support different type of object. And then when you put an object, the Symphony will scan all the asset workspace and figure out which asset workspace to open this particular object based on the type of the object. So is there any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to continue to open an object in the asset workspace using the real data from the data.js. I want to first implement something in my search dropdown. I mean, the search box. So what I want the behavior to be is you search something in your search box. For example, you search something like customer. We're trying to find that customer in our data.js and try to open it in the asset workspace. So that means I want to implement this app search provider that we refer to in my search JS class configuration. So just to save some time, I'm going to copy it from my file and explain it to you. So to implement the search in the header, you basically need to implement two functions. One is what to do for autocomplete. When you start searching, when you start typing the search term, how we can populate the drop-down to populate. So what do we do actually is go through the demo data is the data.js we have. We go through the demo data and find out all the match and show it in the drop-down. And another function to implement is on search. So what happens if you already pick one object in a list and how you're gonna what you're gonna do after that. So what I want to do is to open that object in the asset workspace. So here, after I implement the search provider, now you can start searching. And so the pop-up of this drop-down is because you implement on auto complete. It searches our data.js and find a match and show it in a list. And once you pick something, let's say I pick customer, once you click on search or enter, it will call the function on search. So what it does is to, based on the object type we get from the data.js, and we pass it to the Symphony core open object. So this is a different API from we had before. We have an open workspace before. So this one, as open workspace, you give the workspace ID and open it. But this open app object will pass object information with its type. And we will scan all the asset workspace and see which asset workspace can support this type. And then it will use this asset workspace to open this object. So if I want to open customer, so the customer is open because if you look at the data.js file, customer is a glossary term. So it's a supported object by the asset workspace. If you want to try something else that's not supported by this asset workspace, it will not open it. But I don't think it will work because we haven't really properly configured the asset workspace yet, so it may do some exception. Yeah, I think the customer cancellation 2014 is not really a glossary term, so it's not opening it. But if I try customer cancellation, you will see some errors. It's because customer cancellation is also a glossary term, but because you haven't configured the asset workspace properly, it throws some errors. So let's just look at, go back to look at our data demo provider for the asset workspace. This one is our dataset content provider. It's our asset workspace. We didn't do anything here yet. So once you open, you will see that you will see this name showing in the navigation bar, but you don't see anything in the workspace. And sometimes if you open the second one, it shows some errors because it's not configured properly. So in Dolphin, we after you configure the header and the workspace, we list all the functions that you can implement in your content provider. This is just a list of current public API that you can implement, but this list can grow. So let's use the asset workspace as an example to see how we can implement some of this function. So that means I want to add something here in this content provider container. Let me just, instead of typing it, let me just get it from my file, and I'm going to explain it to you. So here are some of the options. Let's go through them. The first is if you want to show, whether you want to show a panel title. So the archipelago design pattern recommends you have a title for each workspace page. So here I say I want to have a panel title. Whether you want to show portlet. Portlet means that you can have multiple panels inside of your workspace. So let's see if I have the Sonata app. It's more complete example that if you open a customer, for example, we have several panels. So there's the grid here, there's a canvas here. So these are panels. You do not have to use this portlet or panels. If you use it, Symphony can help you to lay out how to lay out it properly. So we can use different ways to lay out it internally. We can use Bootstrap. There are different ways to do it. I don't want to spend too much time on it today. Maybe we can have another session for that. For my app, to make it simple, I just say I don't want to have portlet. It's just a simple page that I will populate the content myself. If you use portlet, you can also contribute portlet from extension. That's another thing you can do with portlet. This one, actually, we don't need it either. I can delete it. But what it's for is that if you have a header, panel header, it has a drop-down, and that drop-down has extensible menu. So again, it's about extensibility. People can contribute manual items to that menu if you have an ID, and then they can use the ID to contribute. So for this particular example, we don't need to use that. Get instance data is once you say, like for example, in this case, we did a search. So I said I find a customer and I want to open a customer whose ID is 1, for example. But you may need to process that data using the data you already have, or maybe you need to fetch it from your backend to get more data. Like for example, what icon you're going to use for this object, and what if you want to, we can also support grouping. If you as a workspace support multiple type of objects, we can group them by type. Then here you can pass not only ID and name, but also pass icon, group label, and other things. But for this sample, I would just pass ID and name. But it's to show you that this is a place that you can add additional information for your instance that can show in the UI. So for example, if you have icons here, it will show an icon like here in your, this icon for the customer. But if you don't specify icon, you will not see any icon. So after we got the data to open the instance in the asset workspace, you also need to, same as in each content for the fixed workspace here, you also need to populate the instance workspace. So again, we have the container element, and you need to inject whatever content you want in this DOM. So here I just print a message, a simple message that this object is open. And here also implement a function called add tool items, and it will add some extra tool items in the toolbar on the top of the workspace. So after this change, let's take a look what my app looks like. So now when I open customer, you see that I have something in my workspace. So this is the header of the panel. And also I add something on the toolbar of the header through my my implement add toolbar items. And also when I get this the customer name, I also render this text in the body of the workspace. So there's a list of all the API that you can implement for you to populate your workspace. There's something I didn't mention in my example, like for example, the scatter width and height and column count. This is for the portlet. So if you want Symphony to help you to lay out your panels inside a workspace, you can specify how many columns you want in a workspace and what the width and the height between your different panels. So these are different things you can configure through the content provider. Is there any questions so far? Okay, so I think the last thing I want to cover today is to introduce how you can contribute to Workspace through extension. So before Symphony next, Symphony 2, yes.
Hey, this is Sri. Hey, could you show an example of what happens if you configure multiple asset workspaces? Maybe you can just quickly show the Sonata demo.
Oh, okay. So in the Sonata, you see that we have actually configured two asset workspace. So one of them supports, I think, glossary, another supports report, I think. So if you want to open, what is the report? Is it report? Yeah, so if you open some report object, it will open a different asset workspace and for this object. So it's internally, the code for the same API open object, but because the object has a different type, it will use a different asset workspace to open it. And I think in the AppGIS of the asset of the Sonata resource, when you configure asset workspace, you can have, here we have two of them, and each asset workspace has different supported objects. The second is for the report. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the last thing I want to show is how to, so far we configure header and workspace, it goes through this API. But what if, I got a question, what if I work for a different team and want to contribute some workspace? So in Symphony 2, we use OSGI, so you can use OSGI extension manager to contribute to extension points. For Symphony Next, we are independent from, decoupled from OSGI, so we can still support that. So the Symphony just care about what extension you want. But to do that, we have another API in Symphony Core. There's a section for how to contribute extension. So this one is a little old. You don't have to code the extension reader. You can just code Symphony Core config extension. Let's go to my demo app. So I have to see. You can code Symphony Core config extension. And again, here you provide a JavaScript class that's called extension provider. And this class needs to, again, implement some function. And what it needs to implement is to get extension function. Let's add it to the demo provider here. So here, first I add this extension provider. That's what I just said here. And what it does is to implement a function called getExtension. And internally, Symphony at different time, depending on which extension, will call this function and ask, is there any extension anybody want to contribute to this particular extension point? So, for example, if you during the config, when we do config workspace, we not only take into the workspace that you pass through config workspace, we also call the get extension here and pass the type, extension type, which is called extensible workspace. We also pass this type and say, is there any other workspace we want to contribute to the geo application? And then in reality, this extension, all the extension will be saved somewhere in the server in some kind of JSON or some other format, and there will be a servlet to help to fetch this extension. But for example, I have here, I've just written a JSON file that say, okay, I want to contribute one more workspace called sample workspace. And there's also a position. We will take all the workspace, registered workspace, through the extension or through the config workspace, and sort them by the position. And same to the config workspace, this workspace needs to have a content provider that I added here. It's just very simple that I want to show workspace that's printing some message in their body. So you can contribute extension this way for other widgets. For example, for our info grid, you can contribute to column. For our menu, you can contribute the items in the menu, like in the workspace header. There's a drop-down. You can contribute menu items through this way as well. So let's take a look at, so this basically just say I want to add one extra workspace to my application. Now you see that we now have a new workspace called sample, and it's because the position I specified, it's 3. So it will be before my asset workspace and after my home workspace. Now if I open the customer, it will be after that. So to summarize, if you want to contribute through extension, what you need to do is before you configure your workspace, or any other things, config the extension provider. And in the extension provider, you can implement the way you want to, how to fetch this extension configuration. And that's totally up to you. The Symphony used to rely on the OSGI extension manager to do that, but now it's up to you to how to implement that. Symphony just needs you to provide this extension provider to give the extension you want to contribute to the workspace. So I think that's probably all I have to say today. So to summarize, we talk about some detail about workspace, config workspace, different types of workspace, how to implement the content provider to populate the workspace, and how to contribute through extension. Is there any questions? It's pretty quiet.
So I just want to make a quick comment on the extensions of Workspace. So before, for those of you who have used the classic Symphony, when you create a workspace, it was always via extension, right? So you have to create a plugin, and then you extend the extensible workspace, and then you contribute your content provider. So with Symphony Next, we still support that way, but you have an obviously easier way to, with the config workspace API to create your workspaces. But for, workspace that really needs to be coming from extensions, like, it's coming from a different team or, it's based on a different product, then you can use the extensible workspaces.
Hello.
Yes, hi, we can hear you.
Okay. All right, I think that kind of wraps up the demo. Thanks, Jesse, for the demo.